special event to honor Dr. Nelson, who was Epiphany's sponsor for over 30 years. So usually our Epiphany coffee houses are in the barracks, though they have sometimes been here. And it is a night that features students, creative writing, music, and art. But tonight I asked that we would especially focus on Dr. Nelson, and so this is meant to be devoted to an evening of his original poetry reading. And those of you who've been involved in Epiphany know that he has read a poem here or there, very humbly, and just encouraging students to use that coffee house space to express their own creative work. But I thought tonight it would be good for us to hear poem after poem by Dr. Nelson, because he has quite a collection that are well worth hearing. So we will have a brief intermission for about 10 minutes after his reading, and there will be a time when people can share memories. They can be funny or serious or tributes for Dr. Nelson, and that'll be after our intermission. And I have a clipboard with a sign-up sheet for that, so during intermission, I'll either place it on the stage or I'll have it on the down front so you could sign up if you would like to share something at the mic about him. And I appreciate Yasmin playing for us in this opening, and she's going to come back during our intermission. Thank you, and welcome, Dr. Nelson.
Low-cost version. I'll have to get a better looking one, I think. But you can hear me okay, right? Yes. Okay. Well, this is completely extravagant. I think probably you should have just had me do a couple of poems. But apparently, under the pressure of the pandemic, Professor Friesen believes that your capacity to withstand pressure and pain and all kinds of things is sufficient to put up with a number of my poems. Okay, let's start with this one, just to make sure that you understand that I'm an empathic person, and I'm thinking that perhaps you are hoping that I understand your discomfort at certain points tonight. This is called He Will Talk Until We Drown. And it is something of a sonnet. The baritone is awash, rocking gently on his heels, puddle of his own tones widening around the podium. Swelling smoothly outward, syllables swash against the walls and rebound lazily tableward, lingering in eddies at chair legs and ashtrays. Obviously, this wasn't on Evangelist campus. The longer words run with the headlong rush of gravity, gouting like the thicker streams from a broken ledge. Impact as the lecture deepens is no mere plash, but the dark bloom of a depth charge. Oh, and the leap of the surface to applaud. Spent morphemes spatter up into glitter. I think that actually came out of an actual experience I had, and I think I wrote part of the poem at the time. It probably was a lecture on a university campus, maybe an evening lecture of some kind. I thought of the words coming out as a flow of water. Eventually, we would sit in deep, deep water. Okay, here's another. This I had the idea to write on a day when I must have been feeling a little melancholy about the humanities. I can't see many of you, and this is really hurtful to me. I'm not sure if it's this shield or what, but all I see is the occasional eyeball kind of glittering out there or something. So I feel like writing a poem right now. But I think I was feeling a little melancholy about the humanities and aware that so many people in postures of joy and delight back for homecoming had stories to tell of making much money. And my dear English majors and my dear friends in the visual arts and my dear compatriots in the Spanish and French programs and so on, under pressure by certain people who would say, what are you going to do with that degree? And I don't know if I was sitting on a bench up there in the quad or what, but this was somewhere back in 2007 that I started this. And I thought of the lonely philosopher student, not maybe graduated from the humanities department, but in the humanities, from the theology department, philosopher coming back for homecoming. It's a woman. Bemused, she sat under the leaves that fell like the fallen years, some dark as hunger, and some bright as the one that dropped golden into her lap. Like weightless gold, she thought, watching the vaguely familiar couples floating by in their bubbles of iridescent joy at meeting again to reinflate the old conversations of success. Now about husbands, wives, and children, and of course, the golden jobs, the market killings, the third car. The weekend's program promised golden words from alumni, made prominent by their gold. The fast food franchisor, the political climber, the financial speculator, the money multiplier. Not a philosopher or a poet among them. How weightless my wealth, she thought, and how far beyond assay. I could not sell a sliver here. She stood, and the leaf fluttered to the cooling earth near an approaching child, gilded with mere laughter. Got that one out of my system. How much, for those of you who still love and practice art, how much I wish for you, kind of moving of the heart that you can only get in your academic ways if you could keep that love for the art and the philosophy of your profession. I know that you are not all philosophers here tonight, but I recommend it to you. In terms of words, or the ideas of words coming from a natural setting, in that last poem they were from trees. The leaves fell in the fall, golden and so on. I have spent a fair number of years, I guess a lot of my life, trying to read nature. I'm not your absolute perfect hiker and camper and backpacker and so on. There are many people who've done more things and more widely and more riskily than I have. But I do love being outdoors. And that's the little kid in me. So I have tried to read things. Trees, rocks, grass, leaves, and so on. Here's one that has a pun for a title. It's called Solar, that is S-O-L-A-R. Solar Scriptura. Some of you recognize the pun there. Okay. It's not meant to be damaging to the original. This is a pun of respect, partly hoping that you will see that in an attempt to read nature, one is actually reading original sorts of composition by the one who gave us the scriptures that we speak of so commonly as being native words. Solar Scriptura. And this again is a sign. I was in New Mexico, I believe, when this came to me, and I was looking at the red rocks formations, cliffs, and so on. Some of them volcanic, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Although volcanic doesn't sound red to me, that sounds more black or gray. But maybe a mixture. And I saw the erosion into columns of rock that were like individual cliffs within the cliff, so on. And I was there to hike up among the heights of those things. High on the red rocks, the night's chill fled the rim and rose in fumy vapors to the sky. What had been looming monoliths above became a shattered syntax in the sun, as if the sun had carved the cracks aloft and thrown the talus shattered down the slope. A gleam of granite words raised golden tones and murmured connotations to the stream. The sunlit water ran among the rocks and rolled hard syllables upon its tongue. The discourse of the years of golden light rose in the canyon like an ancient song. Then, full of other sounds, the yellow rafts came riding down the stream to drown the light. I'm not sure if any of you are, those people who like to kayak downstreams, raft downstreams, go out cliff climbing, things like that. And I had no problem. I like to do that myself. Just, I guess you could say, at a moment like this, when the silence allows the writing to be read, it felt like somebody invading a cathedral. Coming down, maybe with the big coolers of popables, okay? And maybe already having popped a few, being rowdy on the raft. And it felt as if someone, you could say, in at least the imagination, almost felt as if someone were coming through to drown out the reader of a kind of scripture, okay? Well, if that's too mystical for you, forgive me. Okay. Let me try another here. That was a more recent vintage. A few years ago, trying to think who actually originated this request. It was some aspect of our marketing for Evangel. Wanted us to make something to hand out for students who would be in the Founders Program if they were successful candidates. So I was supposed to write something for the Humanities Department to be able to be put on one sheet of paper and put into a packet that these Founders candidates would receive when they came to campus. Well, I don't know if I was particularly in a stressed out mode or what the deal was, but somehow my mind, something clicked, I suppose, in my mind, and I don't mean that in necessarily a positive way. Probably it was a flight from reality. Anyway, I got the idea to represent each of the 4 programs in the Humanities Department in a kind of poetic way. And I made a thing that literally did appear like this. It's a menu for diners at a restaurant that wants to think itself fairly elevated in its cuisine. So I went with it and created a thing called Menu. That's, I suppose, the title of the poem. Founders Weekend Academic Buffet. Okay, I was just rolling with it. Humanities Department. Art program. Now listen, this is the sort of, imagine yourself sitting there and you're reading this. I don't think you would have somebody with a face shield muttering this in your ear. But see if you can get past that and think of these words coming up to you from a menu, tempting you to, get this one or that. Art program. I'm trying to think if I should affect a voice here. kiln-glazed medallions of art history, marinated in essence of perspective theory, and sautéed with zesty woodcuts and fresh watercolors in an aromatic bouquet of studio oils, accompanied by an artisanal loaf of fresh-baked graphic design garnished with a sprinkling of photography. Recommended desserts: chilled dollops of sculpture, or an exquisite tapestry soufflé. Well, English program. How do I represent us? Thick, flame-roasted slices of classic Shakespeare, arranged with choice dumplings of canonic English poetry and prose, in a superbly zesty literary critical sauce with a Christian sensibility. Presented with delicate children's literature sweetbreads from the Newbery Award ovens. Complemented by handmade preserves from the vineyards of exposition and rhetoric. Recommended desserts: distilled T-sol theory and praxis over fresh cut slices of intercultural experience in a study abroad bowl, or a Narnian pudding drenched in mere Christianity. So you're getting in my way here. All right, French program. I'm so tempted, but I don't think I can pull it off. History-encrusted filets of la parole and la grammaire in a fine Béarnaise sauce garnished with savory leaves of Molière and Pascal. Nested among wafers of freshly baked conversation and buttery morsels of classic film drizzled with delicious Parisian pronunciation. Recommended dessert: an exquisite Chez Vous summer at the Jacques Lefebvre Institute in Normandy, France. Oh, sorry, France. Spanish program. Spanish. Grilled, citrus-marinated slices of Castellano, nestled in a bed of sorry, I get Frenchy with my Spanish. Fragrant of Golden Age literature and sprinkled with redolent shadings of contemporary Latino and Latina writing. Served with una sabrosa empanada, stuffed with select passages from the kitchens of chefs such as Cervantes and Lope de Vega. Recommended desserts: spring break community service trip to a Latin American country, or a study abroad semester in Spain. Theater program. Great slabs of thespian theory and praxis, settled in a finely whipped stage tech sauce, festooned with fresh sprigs of improv and stage design. Presented with a robust history helping of the history of drama, and accented with savory on-the-side dishes of makeup and costume design. Recommended desserts: satisfying performance as an actor or a crew member in Evangel stage performances, or directing a play of one's own. Small plates are available in each program. Delectable minors or concentrations, sizzling with resume-enhancing potential for foodies from any department on campus. Reservations available. I think I had too much fun with that one, actually. Let's see. Oh, this maybe should follow something like that. I don't know, are you church signboard readers? I mean, it's probably not one of the main ways churches communicate these days, having the signs out front that you individually change the letters on and so on. That's really old school, but occasionally it's fun to watch what goes up on those things. And I used to drive every day to school past a signboard by a church whose denomination I will not name and so on, that had a way of putting things up that made me chuckle. And occasionally, probably roll my eyes enough so I almost go off the road or something. In one case, the signboard read, if I remember right, so that was it go. something like this. Living in sin? You ought to come in. And I thought, I'm sure the intent was good. Come on in and we'll get rid of that last problem there. Okay? But it actually struck me at one time as if it could be interpreted as living in sin? Living in sin? Come on in, we've got a great poker game going on in the back room. Somebody didn't think through that particular one. Oh dear. Anyway. Speaking of signs, there are a couple of church signs in this poem. I saw a news article that said that on a certain day, I think it was midweek, in a certain year, not too long ago, within 10 or 15 years ago, I suppose, a church in upper New England, it was Vermont or New Hampshire, I think, maybe Massachusetts, a church had been invaded by an adolescent bear, a she bear. And the bear came in and did a few things in the sanctuary and was caught eventually by animal control people who came in with a rifle that fires, what do they call them? Darts. You know, tranquilizer darts. So the bear was tranquilized like up in the choir. And you have to think here of a New England congregational church or something that has, choir with particularly beautifully worked furniture for the choir loft and the seats and all that. So the bear went down in the choir. Well, somehow in my added mind, when I got the word bear and the word choir together, I thought of Shakespeare's Sonnet 73, I believe it is, which has the line in it about bear ruined choirs. Okay? And the poem has something to do with aging and maybe baldness, I think, such things. So the whole thing was perfect for me. Okay? Well, then I started a poem with a title, which is sometimes a good idea, not always. But this time it came to me almost as if, from the cosmos. Bear ruins choir. Okay? Except Shakespeare was spelling it B-A-R-E. He was talking about the branches of trees whose leaves have fallen off. And now the places where the birds sang, up in the choir loft of the trees, is now bare. More or less. Okay? However, I got bear as B-E-A-R. I still like the pun. See what you think of the poem here, okay? I made up a scenario for this in which the bear does invade and is caught and so on. Even the old-timers had no idea why the adolescent black bear was standing in the loft that Thursday morning. Strips of velvet Advent banner hanging around her neck, like a sacerdotal vestment, priestly vestment. The doxology peeling over and over from the tripped carillon. Sober St. Swithin's pews, that's a style of choir furniture. Sober St. Swithin's pews kneeling in dazed devotion at her feet. She, the bear, had torn hope, Advent and the signs and so on that we will put in the candles and so on. She had torn hope from the wall and left it twisted round the director's podium, as if, said wits in town, to signify and doom or bless that good man's weekly battle against entropy. Sorry, that's a pretty complicated stanza, but basically, she twisted the hope banner around the choir director's podium as if maybe to say something about the quality of the choir's singing and his directing. Okay. Down the street, a fundamentalist preacher, hastily changing his church's signboard in light of events, advanced the theory that the youngster there was a sign of God's fed up to hear wrath against people who use liturgy. And so his signboard now, if you had it on paper, you'd see this bold print. This Sunday at 10:30 a.m., Hosea 13:8, KJV, quote, like a bear robbed of her cubs, I will attack them and rip them open. Like a lion, I will devour them. A wild animal will tear them apart. Come to our church. church. Sorry, I'm interlarding some comments in my own mouth. Thus, with a stern volley from the authorized version, KJV, commenced a novel entertainment for a sleepy town. For the pastor at St. Francis's, though a peaceable man, woke to feel the green withs about him. That's a King Jamesy word meaning the things they tied Samson up with. Okay? He woke to feel the green withs about him. Hungry Philistine leers closing ranks behind the traitor. The guy down the street. So here's the signboard of the St. Francis's Church, Presbyterian congregation, or whatever. Sunday worship, 11 a.m. Notice it's a little later. Proverbs 17:12. RSV. Let a man meet a she-bear robbed of her cubs rather than a fool in his folly. I'm not recommending this kind of behavior, but only the quiet sacristan, that is basically the guy who rings the bell or starts the bell, takes care of the church, watches after the sanctuary, does some of the tasks around the church. Only the quiet sacristan had noticed that the Thursday celebrant, I put it that way because I thought the bear went to church. Give her some credit. That the Thursday celebrant wore peace around its neck when the tranquilizer dart struck through the purple, laid her down among exuberant pages of praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King. Okay, I'm adding more than, and I can't sing it. Praise to the Lord, the Almighty had been some of the choir music. The bear is laid down there, wearing peace around its neck, okay, and being thrown out of church. And, last line, upon the pink splendor of satin joy. But it was fun to think about anyway, whatever that bear might have had in mind. Being a teacher, I'm always close to asking, do you have any questions? I don't think I want any questions about this. Since I just broke into something resembling song, let's see, that's probably not the latest one. I'll never learn. I bump into this thing every time. It's as if it's a surprise to me. I've seen other people at poetry readings spend an inordinate amount of time looking for poems as if they had any idea that you could actually plan such a thing. So I'm just sort of channeling that kind of behavior. But here's a thing I wrote in 2014 after a number of students and some professor friends of mine and I had gone to Calvin College in Michigan for a conference. And the Calvin College art department, I guess, or at least their art gallery, had posed a contest for poets, basically saying, come in and perhaps write poems about things you're seeing in our art gallery. And submit them to a certain place electronically, and we'll pick some winners. So I can't say I won anything. I guess I understand how that would be. I don't believe he included the onlookers, but just the Father and the Son. I noticed the Father's wrists, and I took the risks, I don't know if this is true or not, but I took the risks to have some kinds of ringlets. It's possible that's just fabric, but sleeves kinds of things. But I thought of it as the Father having signs of status and signs of wealth and things like that. And the Son coming back, having, in some sense, offended, senses having offended that man and also taken money ahead of time and so on. And this was my meditation on that particular painting. And looking at it, you might understand the poem a little bit better too. say in Fortushniak's, because there's a reference here, in Fortushniak's painting, down here and perhaps behind, there are representations of children in a schoolroom in probably New England. In fact, I think this is a riff on a painting by somebody like one of the Wyeth family or something like that. And the children are learning from books. And they're probably reciting. Okay? So they're learning from books. The prodigal has learned from hard experience. And he's come back, and he's in this emotional moment with the Father. And I wrote, back turned for the moment to the drone of the reading righteous. The Father, ready robed in sanguine hope, bends to the blighted son, road-racked and dung-draggled, lays his silver wristlets as songs upon the sorry shoulders, and sets the pulse of his motherly love as largo measure to the lyric of contrition. Not yet broken enough to know the sound of true sacrifice, the catechumens intone halakha as firm continuo, unaware of how the red rising song will tune their troubled sky. I was trying to think through how the prodigal son story, for one thing, doesn't have a mother in it. But the acceptance of the son by the father has a motherly quality to it. The kind of thing that sort of says, whatever, you're my son. Whatever, you're my child. And I have a feeling that that sometimes comes more easily to a woman, to a mother, than to a man. Can't generalize about that. I think there are at least cases of such a thing. So when I said he sets the pulse of his motherly love as a kind of slow movement of music to the song of sorrow and pain, I'm suggesting the Father is harmonizing with the Son's tune, visually, emotionally. And there's the mother in the prodigal son. That's what I was going for. Okay? I do have a picture of the painting here with me, but I can't show it on the screen at the moment. Well, let me see here. I am a Tolkien reader, and I think I was aware that I was coming up on an Epiphany coffee house at one time. Had nothing to offer that was very new. And if I remember right, I pushed myself to write this fairly quickly, but it probably took me a couple of days. And I don't know about you, but in Tolkien, it's easy to get kind of taken away with admiration of the some of the big names and so on. But the hobbits, don't the hobbits keep coming back as heroic, even though their size and their shape and all of that doesn't seem to suggest it so much? They've always persisted for me as truly heroic and encouraging to people like me, and possibly like some of you, who would like to think that maybe we could pull off something in our lives that would be a little more than what people might expect. And so I wrote this. And again, there's a little bit of a pun thing or something going on in the title. Please don't laugh too long. But old hobbits are hard to break. Yes, I understand. It's really, really corny. And so I made up an old hobbit who had years before fought against Sauron and fought the forces of darkness that had covered Mirkwood, made Mirkwood, essentially. So I've got a poem with stanzas of 3 lines each. Okay, it's not Tolkien, but I'm trying to emulate the atmosphere and the tone a little bit. Deep in the night, the old spider bite burned with a cold flame in the crook of his right elbow, and the sullen scar on his left thigh moaned. Shadows of the courtyard still flickered across the low ceiling like a magic lantern show. The orcs snarling their folk songs with linked arms. When I drop my voice a little bit, it'll be that these are the thoughts of the old hobbit. Okay. If only his twisted right hand thought. If only Snarfur were in my grasp again. No mead song in the world would roar like mine. Drunk on justice. Drunk on justice. The hourly creaking of the rack rent the dark air, and the slow rending of joints rang changes on the nerve wires. A slow tolling of old chaos. Okay, the old hobbit is in prison. He's on the rack. They're stretching his limbs, torturing him. He remembered the trees afoot on the plain, walking toward Isengard with the sound of the great sea in their voices. If trees can walk, he thought, my arms can be the hawk's pinions. My eyes can dart eagle beams. My feet, talons, tear the stones. He remembered the dark tales of the shadow that muddied greenwood to mirkwood before his ancestors' desolated eyes. If the Shire could rise against the shadow, staring across the Vale of Anduin at the murky wood, my hand can startle the shade of Sauron again. He lamented the lost Entwives, the yellow-haired Demeters gone with their gardens, and thought, I will go and gather a harvest for the trees. The rat spoke, the voice broke. A single star's blade fell through the bars to the hurt hand, and a sudden, fierce song leaped at the throat of the rack. I don't know why I felt particularly moved in reading my own stanza here, but I thought, when I made that one, I thought the deliverance for this old hobbit is something beyond the common physical. It's the star beam that hits his hand and becomes a sword-like thing. This is so fantasy stuff. It's not exactly me entirely, but it's partly. He grasps what amounts to a star beam, and it becomes the thing that allows him somehow to cut a cable or a cord of some kind. Okay? Maybe I got my physics all wrong, I don't know, but I had good intentions. And I thought this old hobbit is a tough character. Hard to break him on the rack. Well, I'll be going a bit long here, so. But now, can I read one more here?
Yes.
Okay. How about 2 dog poems? One pretty short. Okay. Actually, the dog may have been short too, now that I think of it. But let's see. Which one first? Which one is? Well, let's talk. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a book that I am generally having students at English 212 read and have done so for some years, but mainly when the Norton book that I use, Norton Publications book that I use, began using Frankenstein as a major model for something. So it wasn't just that I had this thing about Frankenstein. But scholars these days in literary studies are still pretty hopped up on Mary Shelley and Frankenstein because they think that she was prescient back in 1818 when she published a work that seemed to say that we need to be careful about how we interface with our growing scientific knowledge and how we bring technology out of that knowledge to bear upon human concerns. Anyway, I thought I'd write a poem, something close to a sonnet at least, an irregular kind of thing, about a character who does not get much attention. In fact, it's ludicrously to say a character, perhaps, because I'm sure a lot of people would not consider a dog a character in a literary work, unless you're talking about Dr. Seuss or something. But I beg to suggest that we should maybe perhaps have a sort of subfield in English studies, canine studies or something like that. And it would not be about dentistry, it would be about dogs. Okay, sorry I couldn't resist that pun either. It would be a study of incisiveness, but not incisor. I didn't have that written down. That just absolutely abused me at this moment. Anyway, Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, at the beginning of that book, for those of you who don't know, he is riding on an ice floe with one of his remaining sled dogs after he's been trying to chase his monster up into the North Pole regions and so on. He's rescued by this guy named Robert Walton, who's got a ship, which is a good thing to have up there. Frankenstein is encountered on this ice floe, and when Robert Walton's men bring Frankenstein up onto the ship, he's grateful and so on, and he begins to start a friendship with the ship captain, Robert Walton. But the ice floe is not mentioned basically anymore, and I read that and I think, but the dog. But the dog. Okay, and I'm almost certain that the dog is never mentioned more in that novel. So I decided to put things to the right and write a poem about Frankenstein's dog. Even though we don't know much about him, the poet has all kinds of license and so on. So here we go. This is very short. It won't work very long. Okay. This is more or less in the meditation range of somebody sitting thinking, really, couldn't something have been done? Okay, so it starts like this. It goes like this. Of course, literary characters are left in all sorts of awkward and downright painful positions. But what sort of limbo does Frankenstein's poor husky inhabit? The one who mournfully is the only survivor of the team that took defeated Victor toward the pole in the wake of his willful son, the monster. Surely there was room in Robert Walton's ship for a compact sled dog, maybe even for the sledge and some food. But perhaps the dog wanted nothing more of madness on the ice floe, preferring the wind's bark and bite to the man's constant cursing. Maybe the dog, even if he'd been offered a ride, wouldn't have taken it. Like I'm waiting for a different Uber here. I don't know, I haven't confirmed that. And actually, I read an earlier version of the poem. It's missing its last stanza, and I'm sorry about that. Because now that I think of it, the last stanza did make a difference. Oh, here's the other one. I've been like kicking poetry around too. Oh, here it is. It's two little stanzas. Perhaps now it, the dog, circumnavigates the polar world in a slow spiral below Canis Minor, the small bear, this constellation. Perhaps it is locked into the sea ice, like an icon for magnetic north, or a solemn rune for the Rephaim. Literary critics are left all the time with all sorts of awkward and downright painful longings. That's how it ended, actually, in my version. I feel for that dog. I wish it well. It probably is still there. And if you find it, I'd be glad to know of it. Okay, here's the other dog poem. This has to do with actually my dog named Sierra, who was a mostly white, kind of blonde on the top mix. She looked like an Eskimo dog, but it was a Spitz mix with a golden retriever. So some of the gentleness of the retriever and some of the sled dog look of the Spitz with the curled white tail and long white hair and all that. We had her for 17 years and she broke our hearts, and she died a few years back. So I was remembering her and remembered what happened after my mom and dad were gone, I believe. I think it was my dad had gone, and then my mom passed away. And some of her belongings came to our house. Not on their own, I understand it. They were brought to our house. Okay. And one of those things was a grandmother clock, which had stood in the entryway of my mom's home. And I think my dad did certain things. Some nights he would still the bell. Other times maybe leave it on. It would chime at the hours of the night. Our dog visited there on occasion, but not very often because it was a 600-mile trip or so to get there. But when we brought the clock down to Springfield, put it in our house, and the dog heard the chime, there was a kind of endearing recognition, apparently, on the part of the dog. It was like a sonic reminder of something. Do dogs see images in their minds? I don't know. But it was as if it had stimulated memory for the dog. And the dog seemed to want to sit by the clock, as I recall, and perhaps thought that my mom, my dad, would come through the door again, even if it was a different door. It was really quite an endearing thing. So here we go. It's called Preservation, Resurrection. Repaired after years of silence, the tall clock spoke again. First in long considered surprise over the new space it had come to occupy. And then after a dimly remembered marking of minutes, again in mourning the absent hands that long had set and wound and quieted at intervals, unmarked on its face, but comforting. The old dog, who each night had climbed the stairs to sleep near us, suddenly abandoned our bedroom to sleep near the clock. Its statuesque brooding had never compelled her to relationship before, but now its speech seemed to indicate a need for protection or companionship greater than ours. For the dog lay night-long near the clock, as though in service to it. Or did the dog hear, too, the note of elegy in that belled speech? Did the whole world of the clock's first home spring into view within the dog's memory, complete with smells of baking and cooking, and the sounds of rapid feet and speech inclined toward worry? Did the dog wonder if those feet and the long unseen evening hands would appear once more at the nearby door? What grammar in the clock's speech might have reconstructed the dinner table conversation? The olfactory visions of roast beef and dark gravy, the soft luxury of a brown 70s shag carpet. What semantic reservoirs opened again in the 4 round chimes of the quarter hour? The old dog seems not to tire of waiting for the opening door. And I, knowing it will not open again, under the expected touch, can only murmur surrogate love and wait for the wonderful breaking of silence. The last line is intended to suggest some sense in which resurrection will break silence, not just some of the things that we typically talk. I had a student early in my time at Randall who was super gifted, and who was just off the scale in terms of his love of literature and language and so on. So I had a correspondence with him somewhat. He was a work study of mine, and then when he graduated, so we had some letter writing going on and so on. And I wrote him at one point to celebrate his love of language and so on. I wrote something that was just like a total mass of language here. Okay, it doesn't look like a poem. It actually is kind of a letter, but it's supposed to seem poem-like. And the deal was he and I would trade puns and various things, even in person, and then we were always listening to the ways in which words wanted to get together or hang together. And sometimes they would come in pieces of cliche, or sometimes they'd come in pieces of allusion and things. So even though it's a little hard on the ears maybe to hear, listen to the places in which the language gets Siamese. It's like you come up to a thing and all of a sudden you're off on a slightly different track. This is almost like rabbit trails kind of thing. Okay. My main idea here was that I would use every key on the keyboard. Every key. Dear A.W., it's called A Letter to a Friend in Love with the Word. And since he was a Christian, I meant the pun. Your weighty letter broke upon my Ozark Plateau shores like a Cambrian wave, leaving a starry blackened syntax in the Blake sands of the semester. There, I've got that sort of thing off my chest of drawers, where each morning I puzzle out the suitable sock statement for the day of all days. Yes, it is. But cannot heaven help me seem to mate one with one too many permutations of blue and black, black and blue, and the mind reels in a brown foglet of who cares which may be answered with what in the world is the use of argyle in a power-socked world. I was actually talking about the trouble, the frustration of trying to find socks that match in the morning. Okay. Coming down to a holy, that's with EY, a holy end of toe the ever linear demarcation in the soiled Silica Valley under power lines' ominous flux, galvanic mantra of electrons driven to copper-bound utility in your keyboard and mine, awaiting the unimaginably small blue arc of transit from P to N, or N to P, transistorially speaking, beneath each key, but with greatest impatience under Q, Z, X, brackets, at, vertical stroke, caret, and ampersand, where only a Keynesian theory of keyboard use could justify the wing-ding language of punch 'em all, hi-ho. I know you think I'm crazy. To say hello, hello, I don't know why you say goodbye, I say hello. When you least expect it, because that's the whole idea of current, eh? La vie in la différence, with difference. That is, the latter begs the transfer. So here's to keyboard la and le for more than mere divertissement. Lo, indeed, to let the cosmos ring in on all possible keys, let us, souls clapping hands, type gyroscopically, preventing thus the indigence of such great chain entities as Q and Z at Ali. I don't think I'm going to read the whole rest of this for you. I'm even stumbling over my own language here. But the idea is to string things together so that you come up on things like the blue scroll of exhaust behind Chevrolet and Ford, 4 lane-locked, key clueless, to the great dismay of all. Too much smoke in the atmosphere. Including Amazonian trees trying to breathe while watching the bulldozers come, they told me. That's all I'm going to give you here. But the idea was to do this Siamesing, so that what you had was a surface play, even if you didn't have necessarily profound meaning. Okay? And so this was just like an airy piece of bubble gum for a guy who would read a dictionary before he'd read a novel, maybe. Okay. I think I should stop.
Okay, so I got to thinking about what is Dr. Nelson besides a man, obviously. Like, what is he like? What is he like? Okay, so here's what I have to say about that. He's ethereal. He's hard to pin down. He's not like a butterfly that way. Dr. Nelson's not so easily understood. When I was in his class for the first time, English 212, I wasn't completely aware of all that he said. Some things flew directly over my head without even pausing to consider me. I was like a dish sponge that hadn't yet been dropped in soapy water. When I think about Dr. Nelson and the classes I've had with him, it's almost like his students are in a boat, with Dr. Nelson at the helm, steering as he is describing everything on the shore. I run from side to side, trying desperately to take in everything on the banks. Dr. Nelson watches, sometimes laughing, but always smiling as he shares what he knows. I've enjoyed every class I've had with him. I've enjoyed being mentored in our Epiphany group. I've enjoyed learning so much. And not only that, I've been taught to learn. Dr. Nelson has given me fish, but at the same time has taught me to fish. Dr. Nelson, thank you for teaching me, for grinning and bearing me when I asked weird questions or made bothersome comments. You've been a fantastic professor, a scholarly example, and an inspiration to me. Someday I hope to be a published author, and I allot some credit to my high school teachers, but most of the credit goes to my college professors who grew within me a love of literature. This letter is by no means intelligible or even coherent, but it's heartfelt, and in the words of a great man, if you want your face to remain ever young in my memory, make sure to never contact me again. And here are some other choice quotes from my recent class with Dr. Nelson that I thought were very funny, but don't laugh because he said it. Laugh because he said it, not because I said it. So here it is. Even if the volcano runs lava over my house, I wake up as a fossil, so... Okay. When I was a little boy, I wanted to be a Cub Scout, but we were Pentecostal. Let's see. You know that you are an English major, and they are not. Okay. Does anyone else have a thick chocolate chip cookie in their hand right now? Anyway, I think that sums it up. Thank you, Dr. Nelson. You've been an amazing professor to anyone who's an English major and beyond.
Thank you, Natalie. And Natalie Slater and Samantha Baker are currently our co-editors for Epiphany. So they're very involved with this. And next is Danielle Nettleton, who is here from Bartlesby, Oklahoma, one of our alums.
Hi, I'm Danielle. One of the things that I was thinking about to say about Dr. Nelson is one of the words that's used to describe humanities and Dr. Nelson's role within humanities. And that's the word interdisciplinary. And I love words, and I love looking at the roots of words to find out where they came from, because there's a real potency in the original root of the word. And interdisciplinary is from two Latin words, inter, which means between, and disciplinary, which means teaching. So interdisciplinary is between the teaching, and that has, I know beyond even my 4 years with Dr. Nelson, that has always been the way he has taught. Is he has the curriculum, he has the books, he has the poems and the plays and everything else he's studying in his classes, but the way he teaches in his style is so much more than that. Between those materials that could be found in any other class in any other college, he moves between, whether it's references to softball or Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness by Smashing Pumpkins, or standing on desks and ripping out pages like in the Dead Poets Society, which I feel like almost happened in one senior seminar class when a discussion about feminist theory was getting really heated. But interdisciplinary, it's between the teaching, it's all the things that, it's more than the sum of its parts, it's what he in particular adds to it that makes it and him so much more special than anyone else who would teach the same classes, and they would teach them in their own special ways, but there is only one Dr. Nelson, and one of my favorite passages of scripture is from Isaiah 55 because it deals with words and the strength of words. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there but water the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it. And that is speaking of God's words, and I know Dr. Nelson would not like me to equate his words with God's words, although they are inspired by them. But the words that come out of Dr. Nelson's mouth accomplish their purpose as well. He plants them in his students and everyone around them. And his students and everything he puts a seed in goes out to succeed where he sent it and in what they were to do. And I'm very grateful, and my husband Cameron too, who was also a student with Dr. Nelson, we are very grateful that we attended the Evangel English program when we did, because it is incredibly hard to imagine humanities in Evangel without Dr. Nelson.
Thank you, Danielle. So we've had some representation from current students and from an alumna. And now Dr. Mike Tennyson is going to share with us Professor's Voice.
It's a great honor to be a participant in this homage to you, Dr. Nelson. And all I really could come up with was trying to think of some descriptors of you that make you endearing to me. And so I just wrote those down. It's a very crude attempt compared to the dog poem. And I alphabetized it though. So, a sixth language of love, sarcasm. A lover of tropes, consistent, deadpan, deeply aesthetic, earnest, egalitarian, empathetic, excogitative, fair, fair-minded, persistent, an advocate of, and it's P, processes matter, sophisticated, wears black well.
Very nice. Thank you, Dr. Tennyson. And we're going to also hear from Bob Hansen, who is Dr. Nelson's cousin. He's here with us tonight.
I am Nathan's first cousin, and actually I'm kind of in a weird position here because it was shaped by the night, partly shaped by that video that we just saw, and because this is a version of an Epiphany coffee house, I thought I want to bring up something that is part of that I think has been could be lost institutional memory. And it's ironic that I've spent most of my time at Drury. I worked at Drury for many of the years when Nathan was working here at Evangel. And that memory is what I think of as a piece of Nathan's performance art, although I don't think he'd necessarily think of it this way, but back, I don't know, I think it was in the semester or the year after the barracks were torn down, after that nice space that he described it as a sacred space, which it really was for those people at that time. Kind of waiting for the, people gathered to hear something from each other emotionally. And that's part of the definition of, I think, what happens with sacred sites and with religions. Share emotions. So what Nathan did, and this is why I think why it's such a good idea about performance art, and hoping that either LaDonna or the editors here will be able to get this information from Nathan if he still has it. But he before they tore down the barracks around that square, that rectangle there, he apparently used GPS and found the four corners. And then he roped off those. They had an Epiphany, I think, outdoors. The area is more or less out where the clock tower is, I think. And he roped that off. And they had at least one Epiphany in that space. The idea being that it would all come back to this sacred space and do this thing again and share in that legacy from all those students from the previous 10 or 15 years when they had Epiphany coffee houses sometimes, or occasionally at least, in that area. It was kind of not made holy exactly, but it was an area that became in people's memories. Though your predecessors are in their memories, that area probably speaks of something that's everlasting when they think of it. So that's what I want to share. I'm not the person to be speaking about this in one sense, but I don't want that to be lost. So I think as I said, I think it's a piece of performance art, and you should find a way to resurrect that sometime in the spring. And it's outdoors, so it's easy to do in time of pandemic.
Actually, Samantha and Natalie and I have already talked about having Epiphanies outdoors this semester, so maybe that was somehow aligning with our conversations for what's coming. I have one more note to share, and this person took a great deal of time to write this piece, and many of us have written pieces for the Book of Honor, but this one just came in recently, and it will be added to the Book of Honor. This is by Sarah Groves. She was known as Sarah Cobalt when she was on campus at Evangel. And she went on to become a Doug Award-winning writer, writing her own lyrics, creating her own music. She might have been sitting like Yasmin with her guitar there, working out chords, melodies, writing poetry in her mind that would coordinate with that music. And when I think of her, who went on to spend her life ministering to people through poetry and song, I think how many people would not have had the opportunity to initially express their gifts if Dr. Nelson hadn't been sponsoring Epiphany. Whether that was art or poetry or a chapter of a novel or creative nonfiction, or it was music, those spaces were so important for students to have a place to share what they've made. And I remember being a student in that old Joust and sang some of my first poems, and they weren't very good because I really didn't understand how to write poetry. I was learning by reading it a lot and listening to it a lot. But it was a space where I could try. And since then, I know much more about writing a poem. I have far to go. I learned a lot from listening to his own poetry. And I appreciate this formative space for people like Sarah and those of us in this room to be able to offer that creative expression and receive support, even though we know that our gifts are still developing. Right, so this is from Sarah. Dr. Nelson, I send my heartfelt congratulations on your retirement and share my gratitude for your life and work. I was a latecomer to my English major. I had declared a major in social science, but I couldn't stay away from the English department. In the end, I added an English ed major and found a good guide, an exemplar there. For me, you represented an invitation to pay attention, to look for the Christocentric in the music, poetry, and art all around me, to find the truth that is God's truth, the seeds of Eden found in every place of exile. You were not afraid of lament or protest, and therefore created a safe space for students to show up and bear witness to the whole of the human experience, like the writers of the Psalms. When I reread Epiphany from time to time, I am struck by the names of the students that were drawn together there. I can picture them, creative, thoughtful, sensitive, conflicted, interested in congruency, battling self-consciousness, yet feeling a sense of calling. Epiphany as a publication and the coffee house itself were both spaces for students to wonder about the brokenness they saw in the world and the strange light that could come through that brokenness. While I never participated in the printed Epiphany, I did find an outlet at the Epiphany Coffee House and can remember working for hours in the practice room. I wrestled not only with what I was writing, but with all of the constructs around what I was writing. What did I believe? Was it okay to speak my most conflicted thoughts? What was the role of this medium? These bigger questions and the invitation to pay attention stayed with me as I made my way into finding my own voice as an artist and struggled with spaces where the lines of market and message, personhood and brand could be blurred. As Gerard Manley Hopkins says in As Kingfishers Catch Fire, Christ plays in 10,000 places. And I saw him in you, Dr. Nelson, playing, inviting, supporting, calling out. What we do is good. What we make is meaningful. Thank you for being an embodied example of the integrated life. With thanks in Christ, Sarah Groves. And I couldn't say anything better than this. And what you have done for your many years here for students who are trying to find their way. Bless you for the way your life has thrived in ours. We are so grateful for your time here. And thank you all for being at the coffee house. Please come out to our coffee houses that will be outside this semester. We'll be posting some signs, and next time you get the chance to share your creativity. We want to hear from you. Bless you.